Good morning, everyone. Hope your morning is off to a good start. It's 9:30, so we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Erin Kopek, and I'm the Marketing Director for HireLevel, a workforce management resource. Today you have joined our Workplace Excellence webinar series, and we will be talking about managing the newly revised Form I-9 with David Basham from the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. The Workplace Excellence webinars are an exciting program for our clients and colleagues to manage workforce changes and increase workplace efficiency. We are really excited today to learn this new information and also to pass that on to you. A couple housekeeping things before we get started. The call will last about an hour, maybe a little bit over with Q&A. All of you listeners today are set up as listen-only mode. You will have an opportunity to ask questions. And to do that, you will use the messaging function on your GoToWebinar messaging tool at the bottom of your control panel. So let's get started. Dave joined the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services in 2008 following his retirement from the U.S. Army. He has conducted over 500 Form I-9 and E-Verify presentations to nationwide audiences, which included elected officials, immigration attorneys, compliance personnel, to human resources and payroll professionals. In 2016, the American Payroll Association presented Dave with their annual APA Government Partner Award in recognition of his service to the payroll community. In 2014, Dave was selected as a recipient of Arkansas's SHRM, Society of Human Resource Management, Friend of HR Award. Dave's military assignments were numerous in the infantry arena. His military service decorations include the Legion of Merit. Dave's originally from West Virginia, but now makes his home in historic Virginia. Thank you for joining us this morning, Dave, and I will turn it over to you.
Hey, I certainly appreciate that, Erin, and a quick shout out to HireLevel for having me on this very important topic right now. Seeing the new revised I-9 goes live, I think it's early next week on January 22nd. So. With that, you heard Erin state that I'm with USCIS, United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, specifically the Verification Division, and it's our division that's home to the Form I-9 and E-Verify. We develop both the form and the program, the manuals, the call centers, the questions that come in from the public, from employers and employees. We handle all of that there in the Verification Division. I'm one of about 10 to 12 of us that are SMEs on the I-9 E-Verify, subject matter experts that work in the division that either conduct sessions via webinars like this, which are free, or go out to various conferences and whether we speak and or exhibit, and that's free as well, where we handle all our travel. So if you're interested in attending one of yours as a speaker or to exhibit, feel free to reach directly out to me. With that, we're going to jump into today's session on the revised I-9, and you see our agenda here. Yes, I'm not only going to cover the revised I-9, and I'm going to cover it in depth, block by block, because although there's some new blocks we'll talk about, some of the blocks are the same blocks that were on the previous version, but there's some new rules to the game now, and I need to discuss those. Additionally, you're going to see there's some slides that we've added from our previous PowerPoint on the previous version that is the same material, but we still receive tons of questions on those areas, so we always like to discuss those. Then we'll wind down with some storage and retention of the I-9 resources and close out the session with any of your questions. So just a soft reminder, as Erin stated, feel free to go ahead and send in any of your questions in that chat feature. I always like to start my sessions by speaking about the Office of Special Counsel, OSC. Probably the major takeaway on this slide is you see that number down toward the bottom. Employers may also contact OSC at 1-800-255-8155. You might want to jot down that number. As you can see, OSC is within the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, and they enforce those anti-discrimination provisions of the INA, the Immigration Nationality Act. What does that mean? Let me give you an example. We're kind of tied at the hip with OSC. Why? I told you we're home to the I-9 E-Verify. We develop the form. We provide the form, the guidance, the rules, etc. But it's OSC that enforces those anti-discrimination provisions, meaning If you were to tell an employee when you're completing Section 2 of the I-9 with them which documents you want them to present, that's considered document discrimination from OSC. If an employee was aware of that, they contact OSC saying, hey, that employer told me that I needed to provide these documents. OSC may be reaching out to you. They handle those items. Why is that phone number? And this is actually OSC's slide from their PowerPoint deck that we do many sessions with them, whether we sit on panels with them or live presentations. That's their helpline, their hotline number. If you, the employer, maybe heading into today's session or after today's session, feel, hey, I wonder if we're treading on some of the gray area of discrimination on how we complete or conduct the completion of the I-9 E-Verify with our employees. You can pick up the phone, dial that hotline number, remain anonymous. When you dial that number, they have their attorneys and their investigators that rotate on that helpline number. They don't want to know your name, your company, your city, state, NAICS code, industry, anything. Simply ask your question. They would rather help you on the front end than to meet you in the courtroom. And trust me, if they meet you in the courtroom, more than likely they're not going to be sitting at your table. So let's look at these I-9 requirements. Obviously, that big bold first statement there, just a reminder, make sure you have an I-9 on file for all your current employees. That means anybody that you've hired after November 6, 1986, and if they're continuing in employment with you, you need to have an I-9 on file. Yes, if you've had somebody working for you since maybe 1990, here it is, what, 90, what's that, 27 years later, you need to have an I-9 on file. What do you do if you're missing an I-9 on someone you should have one on? We'll talk about that here in a minute. You see that first comment there that the I-9 was revised. Yep, it went live back on November 14th of 2016. And between that date all the way up to the close of business of January 21st, you can use either the previous version I-9 or this new version of the I-9. Or you could use both, meaning I have some customers that say, or clients that will say, Dave, we've just decided to use the previous version of I-9 all the way up to that last day that we can use it, be in compliance, being January 21st, then so be it. We have some say, Dave, we're kind of transitioning, working our way into using that revised I-9. So we can still use the old version some days and then use the new versions other days, can't we? Yes, you can. But when you wake up the morning of January 22nd, if you need to complete an I-9 on an individual to be compliant, you need to do so by using this revised I-9. Look at that last statement here on this slide. Let's talk about that for a minute because we're still receiving tons of questions about remote hires from employers. They were hiring individuals, and from other states we don't see them, but we don't know exactly how we should complete the I-9. So let me use an example here. Let's say Alicia is in South Carolina, and she calls and offers me a job, and I accept the job. Maybe she's going to start a new office up here in Washington, D.C., and I'm going to be the office manager. But she says, hey, Dave, we're not going to fly you down here to South Carolina. We're just going to send your onboarding packet up to you there in D.C. Alicia can have me go to whomever she would like to complete Section 2 on her behalf. Let's read that statement down below at the bottom of the slide. You can delegate the authority to complete the I-9 to a responsible agent. However, keywords to the sentence here, you will retain the liability for any errors. So Alicia could send me to whomever she would like up here in D.C. and have them complete Section 2 on her firm's behalf. Maybe it's a friend, a family member, a former employee. Maybe she wants me to go to a librarian, a notary, an attorney, whomever she would like. But just make sure that that individual knows what they're doing in completing Section 2. And that not only includes how to fill it out, but the instructions or that comes out of that individual's mouth to your employee. Remember, you retain the liability for any errors that that individual conducts on your behalf. Let's go ahead and look at this new Form I-9. This new form here, we're going to talk about it today from two separate angles. We're going to talk about it for those of you that still like to fill out the I-9, pen to paper, handwritten, which is fine, and those that may want to fill it out in the fillable format now. fillable. So first, where do you go to the I-9 to run off the I-9? Well, we have our website. It's called I-9 Central, literally I-9 space Central. You can Google it. You'll see our website for I-9 Central on the resource page here toward the end. But once you go to I-9 Central on the home page and you go down about, say, a third, halfway down the page on the left-hand side, you'll see where it says Form I-9. You click on that, it'll open up a page and it'll say, you know, do you want to open up the manual, you know, the instructions, do you want to open up the form? So you just click on the Form I-9, the form. And when it opens up in a fillable format. Simply means when it opened up on your computer, you can have the employee sit right down there and start filling out the I-9 on the computer. You, the employer, then can scroll down to page 2 and complete page 2 there on the computer. It's a fillable form. It's not an e-form. It's not an electronic form, meaning it's a fillable form. The only thing you can do is actually fill out the form, but you still have to print it off for both the employee and whoever completes Section 2, whether it be somebody in your company or your authorized rep, to both sign and date. Employee signs page 1, you sign date page 2. You can't use any electronic signatures or any electronic dates entered in on the fillable form. Once again, this is not an electronic form. It's simply a fillable form. Now, many individuals are calling this, even though it's a fillable form, we're starting to hear individuals say, hey, this is kind of like an enhanced I-9 or a smart I-9. Why? You're going to see what I'm talking about shortly, where when you complete each page, at the end of page 1, you will click the finish, and how it's going to review all the entries that were put in there in Section 1 to ensure that they were put in the correct format or that there's an entry entered into a block that requires so. Well, we'll talk about that here in a second. But let's look at the top on the left-hand side of your screen. You see that's the first page to this revised I-9. And the snapshots we're going to show you on the form throughout today's PowerPoint presentation is from the fillable form. How will you know it's a fillable form? Well, the fillable form you're going to see in each block is going to have those little blue circles with a question mark. Those helper texts. You're familiar with those, many other programs. But at the top of the first page, when you open up the form in the fillable format, you're going to see there's 3 new tabs at the very top. The tab on the left-hand side is Instructions. The tab in the center is Start Over, and the tab on the right is Print. So if you open it up, as I told you, go to I-9 Central, click on Form I-9. When you click on the form, it opens it up in the fillable format. If you go, well, Dave, we just want to print it off and fill it out pen to paper, that's okay. When you open it up in that fillable format, hit the Print button there at the top of the page. When you hit the Print button now, it's only going to print off 3 pages. These 2 pages you see on the screen in the list of acceptable documents. You know, under the previous version, when you used to print off the I-9, it would print off 9 pages. The 6 pages of instructions, pages 7 and 8 that you would fill out, like here on the screen, and page 9 was the list of acceptable documents. But on this revised Form I-9, like many government programs now with government forms, the instructions are under a different tab. Remember the new tab. Look at all the way up the top at the left, the instructions. That's where you would click the instructions to bring up the 15 pages of instructions. Hold tight. Glad everybody's on listen-only mode. No eggs or tomatoes at the phone. But that's where you would print off the 15 pages of instructions. Why did we go from 6 pages to 15 pages of instructions? There were many reasons, but let me give you about the top 4 or 5. Number 1, like any form, and just like the previous instructions, we need to explain the form. So first we have to give you instructions on completing the Form I-9 when you're filling it out pen to paper. There's some additional instructions on filling it out via the fillable form. There's some new blocks that were added on the form. With that comes instructions. Although some of the blocks that are on this I-9 were on the previous version, but there are new rules to the game on some of those blocks now. We have to provide those instructions. We had many employers during the comment period You know, when a new form comes out in the government, they have to put it on the Federal Registry for public comments. And during that comment period, we have many employers said, hey, USCIS, we wish you would expand on some of the instructions on the I-9 in your instruction pages so we wouldn't have to refer as much to the M274. We heard you, and we did that. So those are just some of the top reasons that we expanded those instruction pages. Now, you might ask, well, Dave, so now when an employee needs to complete out the I-9 and we're filling it out pen to paper, are you telling me I need to hit the instructions tab, which prints off the 15 pages of instructions? Then I need to hit the print tab, which prints off these 2 pages on the screen and the list of acceptable documents, which is a total of 18 pages, and provide those to the employee? Yes. Now, you might be asking, Dave, do I have to print off all those instructions every time for an employee? Well, I'm not going to tell you have to print it off, but you do have to provide it to them. What am I talking about there? Let me give you an example. Let's say you print off those instructions, that list of acceptable document, the 2 pages for the employee to complete, you and the employee to complete the I-9. After they're done completing the I-9, what's to say that you don't ask them, the employee, hey, do you want to keep a copy of these instructions? And do you want to keep a copy of this list of acceptable documents? I'm confident the majority will say no. And in those instances, why don't you just pull them back and marry it up with the I-9 that needs to be filled out for the next employee, so you don't have to recopy those instructions time and time again. But yes, you have to provide those to them. Now, you might say, well, Dave, wonder if we're filling out the form via the fillable form. We open it up online and we're going to fill it out. Do we have to print off those instructions? No, just show them the instructions tab there. Maybe have them click on it and it'll bring up the instruction pages, and just tell them, hey, if you have any questions what to fill out in the blocks, there's your instruction pages. The tab in the center is the Start Over button there at the top. What is that? Well, pretty much defined in the title. If the individual starts typing their information in and maybe they get through the first block, third block or whatnot, and they keep arrowing back and making corrections, and they go, man, let me just start over. Hit the Start Over button. So they can start over. It'll wipe out everything they've done on that form. So let's go ahead and go into this form a little bit more. See if I can click on this. There we go. Here's the list of acceptable documents that's on the revised I-9. I will tell you there were no new documents added on, nor were there any taken off. It's the same list of acceptable documents. Once the individual is completed, you're completed the first page of the I-9, you need to show the individual, the employee, the list of acceptable documents and simply tell them this. We need you to provide one document from list A or a combination of a B document and a C document. That's it. I'm sure many of you may have heard an employee respond to you by saying, well, what does everybody else provide? Or what would you like me to provide? Don't answer that question. If you do, that can be considered document discrimination from OSC, because you would be kind of leading or guiding them what you would like them to see. You would like to see for them. Your response, if they ask you one of those questions, it should be simply, hey, I can't answer that, but you get to provide anything you want, one from list A or one from B and C. Let's continue on. Let's look at each block on the I-9. Well, let me go back here. Now, if you remember anything from today's session, please take away this. Please write it down and highlight it and circle it, put a star beside it. Print off the instructions of this revised I-9. Take a yellow highlighter in the other hand. Go down block by block what needs to be filled on the instructions. Block 1, it tells you do this. Block 2, this. And highlight that. Not only review it yourself, but anyone that has their hands in the I-9 process within your firm, maybe have a meeting, a training class, and review it together. Because I'm telling you, you're going to have highlights all over those instructions. You're going to see what I'm talking about here in just a second. The first line there, hey, the employee still enters in their last name, the first name, middle initial. Let's stop there in their middle initial. Under this version of the I-9, if the employee does not enter a middle initial in that block, the instructions tell them they must enter an A. The next block, other last names used, if any. On the previous version of the I-9, that block just was titled other names used, if any. No, it's other last name used, if any. That block is still an optional field. The employee doesn't have to enter any other last names used. And if they've used 3 or 4 different other last names, they don't have to list them all. It's an optional field. But if they don't enter any other last names used in that field, the instructions state they must enter NA. That's different than the previous version. Let's go to the second line, address. Still preferred for the employee to provide the street number and name. I said preferred. Why did I say preferred? Because on this version of the I-9, unlike the previous version, they can put their street number and name or a P.O. box. You know, in the previous version, they couldn't put a P.O. box. So in this version, street number and name or P.O. box. The next block, apartment number, if they have an apartment. If not, it's not applicable. But guess what? I think you hear me preaching to the choir. As the instructions state, if the employee doesn't enter in an apartment number in that block, they must enter NA. You see there's the city or town block. The next block is the state. Oh, look at the state block. There's a drop down. If you're filling out the I-9 on the fillable form, you're going to see drop downs throughout the form. They're simply that. An enhanced I-9, if you will. Zip code's the next block. Look at the third line, date of birth. Now look beside the date of birth. Just like on the previous version, there's the format, 2-digit month, 2-digit day, 4-digit year. Now if you're running off the I-9 and you're filling out the I-9 pen to paper, although it says that's the format to enter in, I-9 Central, under our FAQs, frequently asked questions, state that if an individual does not put their date of birth in that format on the I-9, as long as the date that they entered into that block is easily recognizable, you're good to go. That's if you're filling it out pen to paper. But if you're filling out the I-9 via the fillable form, sitting there at the computer, they must enter their date of birth in that format, 2-digit month, 2-digit day, 4-digit year. Why? Remember a while ago when I said many individuals are starting to refer to this as an enhanced or a smart I-9? Remember when I told you, hey, when you get done with the first page, at the bottom of the page, there's a brand new button that you will hit that's called click to finish. Click on that. After everything's done on the first page, you hit click to finish. Once you hit that button, it reviews all the entries that were put into those blocks to make sure, number one, they were put in the right format, like the date of birth there. If it's not in that format, it's going to signal an error. The employer will scroll up and they'll see that block will be lightly shaded red, and there'll be a comment off to the side. Hey, the date of birth needs to be put into this format, 2-digit month, 2-digit day, 4-digit year. It also, when you hit that click the button, not only is it checking the format, but to ensure that there's an entry in the blocks that require an entry, such as that middle initial, that other last names, the apartment number. Those areas, those blocks I've talked about thus far that state either you put an entry in that block, or if you don't, then you must put NA. So if they don't put, let's say, NA in the apartment number and they don't have an apartment number, it's going to signal an error. Why? Because the instructions state that NA needs to be put in there. Smart I-9. It's there to help you and the employee. Let's go to the next block, the Social Security number. Now, the Social Security number is an optional field, caveat, unless you're enrolled in E-Verify. And if you're enrolled in E-Verify, as it's outlined in the Memorandum of Understanding that you signed, the employee must put their Social Security number there. But let's not talk about E-Verify right now. Let's just talk about you're not enrolled in E-Verify and the employee's completing the I-9. That Social Security number field is an optional field. So if they elect not to put their Social Security number in there, I know what you're thinking. Oh, I know, Dave. We got to have the employee put in A. No, that is not right. The instructions do not say that if they don't enter their Social Security number in that block that they must put in A. You see what I'm talking about? The number one takeaway is read the instructions, yellow highlighter, review it with everyone. And you hear me stressing all these? Why? It's our sister agency, ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement, that conducts the audits. on the I-9. They're going to look at those instructions, and they're going to see if those instructions were followed for each one of those blocks. Well, if you're following the instructions on the block and you're handling that, you're really on the good road there, aren't you? You see the next two blocks, the employee email address and the employee telephone number, both of those are still optional fields. They can put one, the other, neither, both. But the instructions do state on this revised I-9, if they don't enter an email address in that block, they must enter NA. If they don't enter their employee's telephone number in there, they must enter NA. Okay, I think I've beat that one pretty hard. Read those instructions. Review them with everybody. Let's go ahead and go to the next subsection, which is the employee attestation. This subsection and the previous slide, the employee information subsection, is completed by the employee. Your only responsibility as the employer to that employee completing these subsections is this, to ensure that they completely and correctly fill out the form. That's it. So once they're done completing those two subsections, you, the employer, your only responsibility is to make sure they completely and correctly filled it out. Meaning if they didn't put anything in that middle initial, that employee's telephone number or email address, that you need to tell them, hey, those blocks, you either have to put an entry in there or put in A. So let's talk about this attestation subsection. There's two changes to this subsection in relation to comparing to the previous version. But first, let's talk about, you see the red lines around the 4 blocks, 4 categories. An employee attests to being one of those 4 categories, number 1, number 2, number 3, or number 4. I say again, number 1, number 2, number 3, or number 4. You may be saying, Dave, we see the numbers. Why are you stressing the numbers? Remember those numbers, because in a second, when we get to page 2, I'm going to show you the new block that you, the employer, remember you fill out page 2, that you're going to have to put into that block, which number block here in the attestation did the employee attest to being? Which number block, number 1, 2, 3, or 4? Look at number 3. On this example on the slide, you see number 3, the employee attests to being a lawful permanent resident, and then in parentheses, it states alien registration number or USCIS number. Then there's 2 lines off to the right. The first line on the right is where the employee is going to put either their alien registration number or their USCIS number. If you're filling out the Form I-9 via the fillable form, there's going to be that new line off to the right that has a drop down. It's not going to be on the printed version. I mean, if you run it off to fill it out pen to paper, that block off to the right there with the drop down is only on the fillable form one. And when the employee hits that drop down there, there's only going to be 2 selections that they can make. Was that number that you just entered to the left here the alien registration number or the USCIS number? That's all. So that's one change. The major change on this subsection is there under number 4. You see number 4, an alien authorized to work, and look underneath number 4. You see those sub numbers 1, 2, or 3? So if an individual selects a test of being number 4, an alien authorized to work, then they need to provide down below there in the sub numbers either number 1's information or number 2's information or number 3's information. That is different than the previous version's employee attestation block. You see right down below there we have it highlighted in yellow, the signature of the employee and the date. Even though you may be filling out the form in the fillable form, you're still going to have to run off this I-9, print it off to have the employee use that pen or pencil to sign and pen or pencil for them to enter in the date that they completed section 1. Remember, no electronic signatures, no electronic dates can be entered in on this fillable form. Look at that bottom sentence there on page 1 for this section. All employees must complete section 1 no later than the first business day of employment for pay. This is where in a live session when I start seeing some hands go up, whoa, Dave, I thought we had 3 days to complete the I-9. I'll talk about section 2 in a second, but we're talking section 1. the employee must complete their subsections, the employee information, in this attestation section no later than the first day they start working for pay. But you can complete the I-9 before they start working for pay, but under what conditions? Once you've offered an employee a position and they've accepted that job, anytime from that date, but no later than the first day they started working for pay, you can complete the I-9 with them. I know that's a mouthful. Let me give you an example. Let's say Alicia called, and let's say for this example, I live down there in South Carolina, okay? Let's say that Alicia called me and offered me a job on 2 January, and I accepted the job. And she says, Dave, but for payroll purposes, we're not going to have you start working until the 20th of January. I go, okay. Well, here today, the 18th of January, I bounce into Alicia's office just to do a meet and greet. While I'm in there, Alicia says, hey, Dave, how would you like to fill out some of your onboarding paperwork while you're here? I go, sure. Can we fill out the I-9 today? I'm not starting to work until the 20th. Yes, we can. Why? Remember back on the 2nd, I was offered and accepted employment. Now, a follow-up question I many times get on that from employers, hey, Dave, does that offer have to be in writing or can it be in verbal? The only thing it says is you've made an offer of employment and the individual has accepted it. So you can, in fact, complete the I-9 before they start working for pay, but the key is, have you offered them and have they accepted the job? Now, hey, here at USCIS, we realize the majority of your new hires, you're not going to meet them until they actually start working for pay. But what have we done? We have showed you under certain circumstances where you may be able to complete the I-9 before they start working for pay and be compliant. Let's continue on. The bottom of page 1 is still the Prepare Translator Certification block. And there's no changes in that block. If a preparer, meaning maybe that day I walked in to complete the I-9, and I told Alicia, you know, hey, I hurt my hand playing basketball with my granddaughter last night. If I tell you what to write in each one of these blocks here in section 1, will you do that? She can do that. She's the preparer. So if she writes that information for me, she's going to have to fill out the prepare block. Same thing goes if the I-9 needs to be translated. Maybe English is not an individual's primary language, so somebody needs to translate that to them. Whoever translates the information needs to fill out the Prepare Translator Certification block. That block has not changed, meaning the preparer and or the translator still needs to sign their name, the date they prepared or translated, print their name, etc. But there are 2 new blocks that are directly under that title where it says Prepare Translator Certification on the form. And directly underneath that title, those blocks are side by side. The block on the left-hand side is a block that you would check off and it states a preparer or translator was not used in completing section 1. So if that employee did not have anyone help them prepare it, did not have a translator, then the employee would put an X in that block. The block off to the right says a preparer and or translator was used in completing section 1. If a preparer or translator was used, then the preparer or translator will put an X in that block. If you're filling out the form on the fillable form, and if the preparer or translator puts an X in that block saying that there was one used, the minute they put an X in the block, there's going to be another block off to the right with a drop down that'll appear. And when they hit that drop down, the selections are either going to be 1, 2, or 3. Numbers 1, 2, or 3. What it's asking is, hey, since you marked there that a preparer or translator was used, how many were used? Just 1 or 2 or 3? Because there could be one person that helped prepare the I-9. Remember, my hand hurt. Alicia helped write the stuff in, so she's prepared. Maybe there was a different individual that was the translator. Or maybe there was 2 different preparers. Maybe Alicia started helping me, and as soon as she started helping me and writing in a couple lines, she got called away to a meeting. The minute that that preparer clicks on a number other than 1, if they click on 2 or 3, that's automatically on the computer there in the fillable form going to generate a 3rd page to the I-9. And the only thing that's on that 3rd page is additional preparer certification blocks to be filled out by that 2nd or 3rd individual. That's it. Now you might say, Dave, if we're not using the Form I-9 via the fillable form, And there in the Preparer Translator Certification block, if there was a Preparer Translator used, and the Preparer Translator then puts an X in that block, and if there was more than one, there's not going to be an area there where you drop down or you have to enter 1, 2, or 3. If there was more than one, what do we do for that additional Preparer Translator to fill out their information? Just run off another blank copy of page 1 and use that Preparer Translator Certification block at the bottom for that second individual, just like our guidance was in the previous version. So once page 1 is totally complete now, and the Preparer Translator, if there wasn't one used, the employee checks that block. If a Preparer Translator was used, the Preparer Translator clicks that block, they list how many, and they fill in their information. After that's done, then you, the employer, can sit there, or you can have the employee click that button, click the finish. It's then, as I stated a while ago, it's going to review all those entries to make sure they're either in the correct format or an entry is placed into a block where it requires an entry. If there's errors, they can scroll right on up. It'll tell them, hey, there's an error, and they scroll up and they'll see that block. It'll be lightly shaded red with their entries in there or lack of, and there'll be a block off to the right saying, hey, this is what you need to do for this block. After you're done with that, if they made the corrections, then if you're using the fillable form, all you have to do is then scroll down to the second page of the I-9. Remember, the second page, section 2 and 3, is your baby to complete as the employer. Now, if you're filling out this I-9 in one setting with the employee, meaning that first day they show up for pay, you have them complete section 1, they complete section 1, maybe they're filling it out on the fillable form. After they're done, they hit that, click the finish, and maybe there's no errors, and you just sit down and you scroll down to page 2. Because you're completing that I-9 there in one setting, it's going to automatically populate at the top of page 2. You know that last name, first name, middle initial line? It's going to automatically populate that information in there for you. Now you might say, well, Dave, we didn't tell the employee, or he forgot to bring in his documents on that first day, so he brings them in the next day. So Dave, when we go back in to I-9 Central and we open up this fillable form I-9, and then we scroll down to the second page to complete it, is his name saved there? No, it's not. You just need to type in their last name, first name, middle initial then, okay? Some questions we're receiving on this in regards to this page 1 and page 2, then the fillable form and filling it out pen to paper. Dave, can we have the employee and the Preparer Translator fill out page 1 pen to paper? Like we run it off and they just fill it out pen to paper. But we, the employer, complete page 2 on the fillable form? Yes, you can, and vice versa. If you want the employee or if there's a Preparer Translator to fill out page 1 on the fillable form and you do page 2 pen to paper, you can do that. Additionally, we're getting questions, and hear me out here for a second, okay? Hey, Dave, we like that fillable form, but what we're going to do is we're going to first print off the I-9. We're going to have the employee, and if there's a Preparer Translator, actually put pen to paper and fill it out. And after they're done, we, the employer, are going to sit there and take that information that they hand wrote on that page 1, and then we're going to sit there and type it in the fillable form. Can we do that? Yes, you can do that, but because you're sitting there doing that, then you or whoever's sitting there typing that information in on the fillable form, you need to fill out the Preparer Translator certification block, that block. Why? Because you were sitting there typing that information in. Now, I told you there was new blocks on page 2, and here it is, right off the top. Right there on the top line, and this new block is both on the fillable form and on when you run it off if you're filling it out pen to paper. Right up the top where that last name, first name, and middle initial is, right to the right of that middle initial block is the brand new block that's called Citizenship / Immigration Status. And there's only 4 numbers that you can put in that block. Number 1, number 2, number 3, or number 4. You probably remember what I'm talking about there. That's where you, the preparer, would look back, and I've went back a slide or two. You go back, you, the employer, go back and look at the employee attestation. You see on this example, they selected number 3 category. So then you would look back at the top of page 2 on that new block, Citizenship Immigration Status, and you would put number 3 there. That's it. You would enter literally the number 3. That easy. There's still list A, B, and C blocks. There's no change there. But if you're filling out the form via the fillable form, under the document titles for either list A or B or C, there's drop downs in the document title. Meaning, if I was to show Alicia my U.S. passport, when she goes and I show that to her, she would look then under list A, knowing the document, the passport's a list A document. She would then click on the document title. When she hits that drop down, it lists all the list A documents. She would simply click on U.S. passport. And there in the fillable form, it'll enter in U.S. passport. Then she needs to still fill in the passport number and expiration date, etc. You see there in the middle of the screen is a brand new block as well. It's never been on any version of the I-9. It's called additional information. What do you put in there? Well, it's pretty much defined in the title. If you have additional information that you would like to relay or explain on that I-9, there's your block, there's your area. That was one of the big items that we heard from the public and from other individuals. Hey, USCIS, your past guidance, if we had additional information to put in on the I-9, you told us to write on the top of the form, bottom of the form, on the legends, on the side, and between paragraphs. We need some area to write something in. There it is, right there, additional information. Below that is still the certification paragraph. You certify you're the individual that saw the documents the individual provided you. That you held those you saw them, you hold them, you're the one that saw them, you're the one that completed section 2. Remember, you can't accept fax copies of documents. You can't accept Skyping of documents. You've got to actually see the document, hold the document, you're the one to fill it in. Or whomever sees the documents fills in that section on page 2, and they're going to sign the certification block down below to include that one block where it says the employee's first day of pay was what day. Look off to the left-hand side. I told you that section 2 is completed by you, the employer. That's your baby to fill out. Look at the second comment, and this still brings a lot of questions from employers. You must complete section 2 no later than 3 business days after the employee begins working for pay. Remember, section 1, those 2 subsections by the employee must be completed no later than the first day they start working for pay. But you, the employer, have up to 3 business days after they started working for pay to receive that document or documents from the employee and complete section 2 to be compliant. Now, if Alicia's company is open Monday through Friday and closed on Saturday and Sunday, if I started working for pay on Monday, what day of that week does the I-9 need to be complete to be compliant? And remember, the true definition of a complete I-9 is both section 1 and 2 are completely filled out, signed, and dated. So what day that week? I generally get 2 answers. Oh, Dave, that's Thursday. Oh, no, Dave, that's Wednesday. When the actual answer is Thursday. Why? Look back at that statement on the left-hand side. Must be completed no later than 3 business days after. 3 business days after the employee begins working for pay. 3 business days after Monday. That would be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I gave you the example that Alicia's company is closed on Saturday and Sunday. Why? If I started working for pay on a Thursday, then when would the I-9 need to be complete to be compliant under that scenario? That would be Friday, Monday, Tuesday. Your business days. Additionally, you see on the lower left-hand side there, the employer must examine original documents. Remember, no Skyping, no copies of documents, no faxes of documents. The only document that doesn't have to be an original, you can accept a certified copy of a birth certificate. And any of the documents that they show you, if they have an expiration date on them, they cannot be expired. Let's look at examining documents, genuineness and photocopies. We don't require you to be a document expert, but you must. And this slide is no different. It's the same slide we used on the previous I-9, but where you receive a lot of questions on accepting documents. Look at that second statement there. You must, capital letters, you must Accept the document presented by an employee if it reasonably appears to be two things. Does that document look genuine? And does it relate to the individual? If you say yes to both of those, you must accept the document, period. Now, in sessions here, this is where I'll generally have one or more hands go up. Hold on, Dave. It's not our first rodeo. We've had some extensive training with our firm on fraudulent documents, and our policy goes up and beyond that by saying A, B, C, X, Y, Z. Well, if your policy goes up and beyond what you just read here on the screen, you better pick up, I would highly recommend you pick up the phone and call the Office of Special Counsel. Review that policy with them. You see there at the bottom of the slide, as I had previously stated, the documents as shown to you must be original, no photocopies. The only exception is the certified copy of a birth certificate. Let's talk about receipts for a minute. And I don't know why, but here in about the past 6 months, and as you heard Aaron state, all I do is conduct these sessions, live or via webinar. And I have been getting flooded questions with receipts. So that's telling me more and more employees are providing receipts to employers at the time of the I-9. Some employers, that's the first time they've seen them, so they're not aware. What is a receipt? How can I accept that? So for those of you that haven't, or maybe those that you have, let's review that real quick. Remember this about a receipt that's shown to you by an employee as a list A, B, or C document. It's a temporary proof document. It's just a temporary document. As number 1 states on the slide, a receipt is basically showing that your employee has applied to replace a document that was lost, stolen, or damaged. That means the document had already been issued to them. They're not applying for the document for the first time. It had already been issued to them, and they've lost it or stolen or damaged, and so they went back to that agency and said, hey, I lost it, I need a replacement. Many agencies then will provide a receipt and say, here's a receipt until we send you that actual document. True story. Although I work here in D.C., I live in Virginia. In Virginia, where we get our driver's license, it's called the DMV, Division of Motor Vehicles. Several years ago, I lost my driver's license. I bounced into the DMV, filled out the form, paid the $20. The young lady ran off a receipt and said, Mr. Basham, until we mail you your replacement driver's license to your home within the next week, here's a receipt to prove that you have a driver's license. You know, I could have bounced out the DMV that day, went across the street, and a restaurant was hiring and needed somebody to start work right away. Me and the employer sat there and filled out and completed the I-9. I happened to have my documents on me when they showed me that list of acceptable documents, and I looked at list B and C, said, hey, I got my driver's license receipt on me and my Social Security card, a list C document. The employer would have to accept that. But I told you the receipt is only temporary proof. Look underneath number 1. The employee must present that replacement document. I would have need to show that employer my actual replacement driver's license within 90 days from the day I started working for pay. Because remember, the receipt's just temporary proof. If I can't show that employer that replacement driver's license within those 90 days, then the employer can terminate me. Why? Because remember, that receipt is just temporary proof. Now you see there's some additional information there on this slide that you can read this once you get the slide deck if you haven't already. But look at the last statement on this slide. Receipts are never acceptable if employment's going to last less than 3 business days. So if they're only going to work for a day or two and they want to provide a receipt, you can't accept a receipt. Copy and documents. No change from our previous guidance, but we still receive questions on this. You can read this paragraph or you can remember this. In regards to the showing them that list of documents and they provide a list A or B and C, in regards to those documents, you either make a copy of every document that's shown to you or you don't make any copies at all. It's one or the other. Uniformity, that's the key word here. Auditors want to see what you did for one, you do for all. This is where I'll have employers go, Dave, we make a copy of every passport and permanent resident card shown to us, so we're good to go, aren't we? No, you're not. You're making copies of just 2 selected documents, not all of them. I'm asked many a times, well, Dave, we never used to make copies in the past, but we're starting to think maybe we should start making copies, but we're concerned somebody's going to holler discrimination. An example. Alicia hires me now. We complete the I-9. She says, hey, I want to make copies of these documents. And I say, hold on. You hired my buddy 2 weeks ago. You didn't make his copies. That's discrimination. You know, a memorandum for file or a memorandum for record would fix that, won't it? On your company letterhead here dated January 18th. Hey, for purposes of the I-9 and documents, our past policies was we did not make any copies of documents provided for purposes of the I-9. Moving forward, we will now make copies of all documents. Put it in a file. You have an internal or an external audit that comes into question, you pull it out, end of story. I can tell you this much. I'm not ICE. I can't speak for them. But I do many sessions where ICE auditors are around and I'm always picking their brain. And I can tell you that they love to see memorandums that explains your policy. They love to see notes on the I-9. It tells them why you did certain things. It gives them that story. Let's go ahead and continue on today's session. Okay, here's the last section on page 2 of the I-9, section 3. I will tell you there were no changes in the re-verification section. No changes. But let me tell you about the 2 most common questions I'm receiving on section 3, even since November 14th when the new version came out. The number 1 question in section 3 is, Dave, which documents do we or don't we have to re-verify? Hey, look at this next slide. See, here's a chart. I'm going to review that in a second. It's going to tell you which you do and which you don't have to re-verify. The second most common question is, David, if an individual changes their name, do we have to record that name change in section 3 of the I-9? Well, look here at the bottom of this slide. You see the second comment, you may also complete section 3 if you, and look at the second sub-comment under that. Update the biographical information of an employee. If an individual changes their name, gets married, divorced, or just otherwise changes their name, you may record that name change in section 3. You may. You don't have to. But remember that word I used, uniformity? If you record a name change for one individual in section 3, you better do it for everybody that changes their name. Look on the left-hand side of this slide and look at this chart. Anywhere between November 14th of 2016 and here at the close of business of January 21st, 2017, if you need to complete section 3 on an I-9 of an individual, you may do so using the previous version of the I-9 section 3 or this version of the I-9 section 3. But look on the right side chart. When you wake up the morning of the 22nd, if you need to complete section 3 on an individual, you need to do so by using section 3 on the revised I-9. Here's that chart where I told you that we added this chart in our PowerPoint probably about 2-3 years ago. Because we always would get questions, hey, which documents do we, don't we have to re-verify? I know you might say, boy, they started off with do not re-verify right off the bat. Why? Because those are the most common that we get asked about. You don't have to re-verify. You don't re-verify. Those passport or passport cards, permanent resident cards, or any of the List B documents. Remember, a driver's license is a List B document. So at the time they completed the I-9 with you, the document looked genuine. It related to the individual, and it was unexpired, and you accepted that. You filled in the I-9. But now the document's expired. If it's a passport, passport card, permanent resident card, or a List B document, and that document has now expired, you don't call them back in. You don't have to re-verify those documents. There are 2 exceptions to the permanent resident card where you would. You see those in the middle of the chart. And those down below that you would re-verify, those list A or C that have an expiration date. Correcting mistakes and misinforms. Let's talk about this real quick. No change from our previous guidance, but this is an area we receive lots of questions on as well. Hey, Dave, can we make a correction on the I-9? And how do we make that correction? Yes, you can make a correction on the I-9. Simply line through the item that needs to be corrected off to the side, make the correction initial and date. No strikeovers. Hey, Alicia, watch this, and we'll turn that 4 into a 7, to a 7, to a 7. And no whiteout on the I-9s. Now, let me ask you this, though. If an item needs to be corrected on page 1, where the employee fills out those 2 subsections, the employee information and the employee attestation, who should make that correction? Well, let me give you a hint. Who did I tell you fills out those subsections? The employee. So if the employee fills out those subsections, then if an item needs to be corrected, you need to bring the employee back in to make those corrections. Now, the top question follow-on I usually get when I say that is, well, Dave, if we're doing an audit on our I-9s and that employee is no longer here, but we see an item needs to be corrected in Section 1, how do we make that correction? Well, you can't correct what's not there, right? So if they're not there, you can't make the correction. Correcting mistakes. Look at the missing forms down below. Let's say Alicia started a company 4 years ago. And on the day she started her company 4 years ago, she hired 10 employees. And here it is 4 years later, she has the same 10 employees working for her. She hasn't hired anybody, fired anybody, etc. Today, Alicia's doing an audit on her I-9s, and she realizes she's missing one, and it's on me. What does she do? Follow me on the screen here. She immediately provides me with that I-9 and says, hey, Dave, I can't find your I-9. I'm sure we filled one out. I need you to fill it out here today. So I fill out Section 1 here today. And when I date it today's date. I don't backdate it like the slide says. I date it today's date. Then as the slide says, Alicia provides me 3 days to provide her those documents or document. Let's say I had my passport on me, because we all walk around with our passport, don't we? Just a joke. But let's say I had it on me. I provide Alicia that List A document. She filled in Section 2. And down at the bottom, she's going to print and sign her name, and she's going to enter the date that she saw that passport, and the date she completed Section 2 was actually today. She's not backdating that date. But that date above there, where she certifies the date I began working for pay, that's where she's going to put that real date of 4 years ago. Now, if you're following me, you might say, no, hold on, Dave. If Alicia gets that I-9 audited, and it shows that you started working for pay 4 years ago, but you and Alicia filled out that I-9 and dated it and signed it today, she's going to get written up for a late I-9. And you're exactly right, she is. But it's not going to be as painful if she backdates the I-9 or has me backdate it and gets caught. You're in serious trouble if you backdate an I-9. And remember, these auditors do this for a living. They know all the tricks to the trade. And in this scenario that I've just told you about is a common one that auditors have relayed to me of employers that will go and have I-9s filled out and have employees backdate them, and they'll backdate them all the time. Backdate them 5 years, 10 years, or whatever. And in this example I just provided you would be an easy one for the auditor to catch. Why? Because this version of the I-9 nor the previous version was even in existence 4 years ago. So be very careful when you're completing I-9s that are missing. All right, let's look at some storage and retention. I've only got about 5 minutes left here, so if you have any of those questions, send them in the chat feature. Storage. Make sure you have an I-9 on file for all your current employees. Those that you hired after January 6, '86, and they're still working for you. I told you what to do if you're missing an I-9. Store the I-9s anywhere you want, on-site, off-site, but if you get a notice of inspection, you have to be able to provide those I-9s within 3 days. We recommend if you're making copies of those documents, you know, those List A or B and C documents, that you file those with the I-9. You don't have to. That's your business decision. And obviously, because there's personal identifiable information on those I-9s, names, socials, maybe date of birth and stuff, store those where only authorized individuals have access to them. I always like to say in my sessions, don't put them in a 3-inch binder and put them in the lunchroom. Let's look at retention. Retention meaning, how long do you retain an I-9, and here's the key words, after they no longer work for you? How long do you retain it after they've left your company? Because you know if they're still working for you and you've hired them after January 6 of '86, you have to have an I-9 on file. But once they leave, how do you retain it? Look here on the slide. 3 years after the date you hired an employee, or 1 year after the date employment terminates, whichever is latter. I know that's a mouthful. I like the examples. Look below. Alicia hired John on November 1st, 2014, and she had to let him go on July 5th, 2016. So how long does she retain that I-9? She pulls his I-9 out. She sees there on page 2, the date he started working for pay was November 1st, 2014. She adds 3 years to that date. Put that date off to the side. She then takes the date she had to let him go in this example, July 5th, 2016, add 1 year to that date, put that date off to the side. Which of the 2 of those dates are latter? In this example is November 1st, 2017. That's how long she needs to retain this I-9. Where does she retain the I-9? Anywhere she wants. Let me ask you this, what does she do with that I-9 after that retention date is come and gone? You know, the instructions are not going to tell you what to do after that retention date. You call our call center, it's not going to tell you. But I'll tell you this. Now let me take my official hat off. Why would you want to keep it past that date? Let me put my official hat back on. You need to keep that I-9 up to that retention date. Okay, some resources here, just a page or two. Hey, I've talked about I-9 Central throughout today's session. You see there's the links both in English, and I-9 Central is available in Spanish. When you go to our I-9 Central page, there's a lot of great tabs where you can click on for information such as Know Your Rights. You might want to read those for employees' rights to make sure that you're not violating their rights in completing the I-9. Mergers and acquisitions. Hey, you buy out a company or a company buys your firm out. How do you handle those I-9s? We always conduct our speaking sessions are free. There's no charge. If we come to your event, whether it be a seminar, a company conference, an association conference, and we speak, there's no charge, and we pay for all our travel. And on I-9 Central, there's some examples of those acceptable documents you might want to take a look at. I told you I'm with Outreach. I'm one of about a dozen that speak around the country on the I-9 E-Verify. And here's our customer care line number. Let's see if I can bring that up here. There we go. The customer service page here. See that employer hotline number at the top, 888-464-4218. Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. your time zone. Call and talk to one of our live reps with any I-9 E-Verify question. We say your time zone. Why? Because those call centers are in Buffalo, New York, Washington, D.C., Lincoln, Nebraska, and Los Angeles. You also see our email addresses and our websites. And this concludes the session, ladies and gentlemen. As a basic disclaimer, basically telling you this was an informational and an instructional session, if you will, on this revised I-9. So with that, I'm going to then turn it back over to Aaron so we can go ahead and jump into some questions. Aaron?
All right. Everyone, I do not see any questions right now, so please feel free to type your questions out in that question toolbar in your GoToWebinar portal. And I will relay those to Dave.
Hey, while we're waiting for those, Aaron, let me just go ahead and review a couple things, okay, that are hot. Remember, run off those instructions, yellow highlighter, okay? Very big. I think you heard me beat that pretty hard, okay? Remember those new blocks on top of page 2. Fill in that last name, first name, middle initial, and that new block off to the right, the citizenship immigration status. What do you put in that block? All you need to do is refer back to the employee attestation on page 1. Which one of those 4 blocks did they enter? Put that number in there.
You have asked about copies of the presentation. We will be sending that out, and also the recording for you to view at a later date. All right, there is a question. It says, if using E-Verify, can we only maintain copies of the photo match documents as required?
Great question. And for those that are not familiar with E-Verify, let me explain that a little bit. First of all, your policy in regards to copying documents needs to be, as I stated, either you make copies of all documents or you don't make any copies at all. But the one attendee asked about some photo matching documents and making a copy if you're enrolled in E-Verify. If you enroll into E-Verify, which basically I call it the I-9's companion, it takes the I-9 one step further. The MOU that you sign with E-Verify, the Memorandum of Understanding, states that you must make a copy of any one of these 4 List A documents I'm about to tell you. U.S. passport, the U.S. passport card, permanent resident card, or the EAD card, that employment authorization card. It says you must make a copy of those 4. Now, where the question comes in from employers many times is this. Dave, our base policy is we don't make any copies of any documents. But now we've enrolled in E-Verify. And E-Verify's MOU says that we must make a copy of any one of those 4. Dave, if we make a copy of just any one of those 4 documents that are shown to us, but none of the others, are we still in compliance? Yes, you are. Why? Because your base policy is you don't make any copies. But you're abiding by that federal contract with E-Verify stating you will make a copy of any one of those 4. So within that, hopefully I've covered that with documents, and hopefully I've answered that. So with that, back to you, Erin.
I do not see any more questions coming in. You must have covered everything very thorough. Lots of comments on appreciating your time and also enjoying your humor today. So it's always great to hear that.
I appreciate that. Anytime, Erin.
I guess that will wrap it up then. We can go ahead and close out. Dave, I appreciate you presenting today, and everyone on the call. We will be in touch with copies of the presentation, as I know this was a lot of information. So we appreciate it, and I hope everyone has a great day today.
Thank you.
Thank you.